Good day. Professor Wiseguy coming at you today from my doomsday bunker. Above us, 20 feet of steel reinforced concrete and other measures that operational security prevent me from explaining. This is where I'll be in the event of global nuclear war or a zombie apocalypse. I'll be hunkered down here, waiting for the smoke to clear up there. I have everything I need here. I have water. There it is. I have food. And I have reading materials. I'm set. And should you come knocking when bad things happen, don't you think about coming without bringing beef jerky. Yeah, everything's good. I'm set. But honestly, it's getting a little claustrophobic down here. I think I'll go up to my normal spot. All right, I'm back in my accustomed place, but I'm here to talk about prepping. I have to be a little honest. That little concrete box where I started out is not really my doomsday bunker. See, I live in a 115-year-old dairy barn. That space was built as a root cellar at some point since 1906. We don't have 20 feet of concrete on top of it, and there are not stores of anything down there, just a light-duty extension ladder. All that being said, my wife and I have kind of gotten into the prepper mindset. We're not going full tilt Mad Max or anything, but we have been thinking about getting ready to deal with whatever curveballs life chooses to throw at us. You're probably shaking your head right now and thinking that I've lost my mind. You imagine me with cases of MREs and a full arsenal of weapons, but that's not how things are. I'm not envisioning a zombie outbreak, and if we experience a nuclear war, I'm kind of inclined to just let it take me down. Instead, we're thinking about being flexible enough to deal with the sort of nasty things that the world could throw at us. These could be relatively short-term or permanent, localized or worldwide. Here are some of the crazy scenarios we've imagined. A cargo ship gets stuck in the Suez Canal and disrupts shipping to such a degree that we can't get the things that we need for normal life. Of course, that could never happen. A ransomware attack takes down the meatpacking industry or the power system or a gas pipeline so that we have interruptions to those supplies. That's not likely. People freak out and panic, buying up every square of toilet paper in the Western Hemisphere. Not that this would ever happen. Unusual weather hits some place that's normally mild, let's just say, hypothetically, Texas. And it nearly knocks the power grid down to the ground. It'll never happen, of course. A global pandemic closes businesses and disrupts nearly everything in our lives. I know it's unlikely, but of course every one of those things has happened in the first half of 2021. I guess the toilet paper was 2020, but every one of them has caused some significant disruption for at least part of the United States. So what if one of those things had been worse, which they all could have been fairly easily? How well could you do without electricity for a week? We're talking no Netflix. The type of prepping that my household is doing is making sure that we have some kind of plan to adapt when things are challenging for more than a few hours. A plan so that we don't starve or dehydrate or freeze to death if the power or the water or the stores or whatever suddenly become unavailable. As we were installing the landmines around the outskirts of our yard, I'm kidding. Really, don't take things so seriously. As we were filling some water containers, I thought about how education is the ultimate prepping. Now, hear me out on this. Some people get trained to do a job. Maybe they get trained to use the online ordering system for their work. That's great. But what do they do when the system is changed or when it goes down? Some people are utterly flummoxed when the procedure they were trained to do suddenly doesn't work anymore. You've probably seen the situation where a store or an office is brought to an unceremonious halt because the computers are broken or the network is down. How different is that from most of us when the power goes out in the middle of winter? How are you going to cook your food on that electric stove? How will you do without a microwave? How long will the food in the fridge stay good? How will you keep yourself warm? Even if you heat your home with gas, your furnace's fan isn't going to turn on no matter how cold it gets. Just as disaster prepping can help us to adapt when the power is off for an extended period of time, education can help us to adapt when the broader world shifts unexpectedly. Now, over the last 200 years, the means of putting words onto paper have changed multiple times. In 1821, you'd have been writing with a pen or quill that you dipped into a bottle of ink. In 1827, the fountain pen was invented, meaning that you didn't have to keep dipping your pen in the ink. 40 years later, in 1867, the typewriter was patented. But of course, not everybody could own a typewriter or even wanted to. Meanwhile, on the handwriting front, the ballpoint pen showed up in the 1920s, roughly the same time that electric typewriters appeared. Then, later in the 1900s, we got word processors, first as dedicated machines and then as software on our computers. Today, voice typing is increasingly accurate and useful. Not even an old geezer like me has lived through all of these changes, but most people live through some of them. When I was in grade school, we were not only taught printing and cursive writing, but were drilled intensively on the formation of the letters. It was considered important, maybe even essential, that a well-educated person be able to write in a way that was not only legible, but elegant. Today, I generally don't care if anyone can read my handwriting except for me. When we see changes coming in the way that we put words on paper or virtual paper, we can act completely confused, sort of like the power being out for an unprepared person, or we can behave like an educated person and adapt to the change. Education is not the same as just learning stuff, just like prepping is not the same as sticking stuff in a pantry. Education includes learning stuff, but that's not all it is. Instead, education involves a change in the way our minds work. Education, to be worthy of the name, should help us to develop flexibility in problem solving and critical thinking. In chemistry, we should learn to think like chemists. In law, we should think like lawyers. In history, well, you get the idea. Certainly in each of these cases, we'll learn facts, valences, rules of evidence, dates and events. But more importantly, we'll learn how to work with those facts, processing them, analyzing them, and integrating them when new facts or theories appear on the scene. Now let's go back to this prepping stuff for a minute. If all we do is gather a bunch of stuff, let's say food, then we're only doing the bare minimum of prepping. We need not just to have the food, we need to know something about the food. How much should we eat each day? What sorts of food should we eat to get proper nutrition? How do we prepare the food? How long will the food last in storage? Without some of that knowledge, then my food is just a bunch of stuff in the pantry. It's not really prepping. Of course, if I had a choice between having the food with no knowledge on the one hand, or having no food but lots of knowledge on the other, I'd probably prefer to have the food. But ideally, I can have both of those things. The food and the knowledge about how to best use it. Education involves its own equivalent of food. Let's call them facts. But if that's all that it has, then it's of limited use, especially in the longer term. Facts often age badly. They become outmoded, worn out, replaced, or simply improved upon. But if you have the skills to do things with the facts, then you can continue using what you've learned. Education is the ultimate prep. To be clear, when I say education, I'm not talking about simply earning credits or getting a paper to hang on the wall. Lots of people go to school, check a lot of boxes on a degree program, and achieve only minimal real education. On the other hand, a huge amount of the fine education takes place far away from classrooms. The sensible prepper hopes that all the skills and supplies that have been acquired will never be put to use. Hopefully, the nukes will remain in their silos and the zombies will stay in the movies. When an emergency does show itself, it's almost guaranteed to play out differently than the prepper expected. The educated prepper, however, will be able to adapt to whatever situation comes along. In the same way, the sensible, educated person will almost certainly use many of the skills and knowledge that have been acquired through education when the world turns out to look different from expectations. This person will accept that change is inevitable, but the education process will help the person in question to adapt these skills and knowledge to the new world that emerges. Just recently, my 90-something-year-old neighbor, a man with a doctorate in biology from Southern Illinois University, moved out of his house. He told me that after earning that degree, he never had a job that actually required it. Did he waste his education? Not at all. That biology degree didn't have him leading a research team in the Amazon, but it did help him to make many adaptations and adjustments over a long and varied life. Education is the ultimate prep. If you find these videos useful, you know what to do. But as for now, get out of here.